Thank you so very much. I am grateful to Alexander Vistola and Joseph Patzner for the invitation to be able to speak to you this evening. I've enjoyed several of the presentations previously this year, and I do hope that this presentation this evening meets your expectations for Masonic education. When I've delivered this presentation in person, I've asked the question, who is fluent in ancient Greek? And I don't mean the Greek of Moussaka or Spanakopita or Ouzo, but rather the ancient Greek of Homer or of Aristotle, or more particularly of Euclid. I would also ask, who is fluent in medieval Latin? This is the language that allowed learning to flow from the East to the West. And the 2020 Prestonian lecturer, Brother George Boyce Stone, admitted that he is a professor of classics and philosophy and now at the University of Toronto, and he is fluent in Greek and Latin. So after a short chat with him, he confirmed that the translations that I've used for my research are correct. And I also ask, who has a complete understanding of geometry? And after a lecture, one brother came forward and admitted that he had an advanced degree in mathematics, but he hadn't worked through the basics of Euclidean geometry. So with that, I ask you to please bear with me and accept my research. This emblem, this symbol, is the subject of this presentation. It's the shape of this particular emblem that is important, as I shall demonstrate, and not the content within this shape as is presented here. But just so that I can hold your attention a little while longer, there are three key questions, and I will provide the short answers right now. What is the Master's emblem? I assert that it is the diagrammatic proof of the 12th problem of the first book of Euclid. When did it arise? Well, it was a Tuesday night. It was February 15th, 1814, when a committee of Masons, yes, a committee, got together at a tavern. Well, of course, it was a tavern in downtown London, England. They were authorized by the United Grand Lodge of England to be members of the Board of the Work, and they conducted quite a bit of work, including purchasing the land and acquiring the rights to be able to build what is now Freemasons Hall in downtown London, England. We know this because the handwritten minutes of that meeting were kept and referred to, and of course, read and approved at the subsequent meeting a month later. And who created it? I assert that it is Right Worshipful Brother James Agar. Now, in this presentation, I'll show how I conducted my research so you understand that my conclusions and assertions are grounded on reality and not just opinion. I'll explain how Euclid presents the 12th problem or proposition from his first book, and I'll direct you to my website for some more information. As a new Mason, I sat and lodged with my sponsors and mentor and asked about the different aprons all around me. This is a representation not too long ago, pre-pandemic, of sitting in lodge with three entered apprentices being presented here. You can see at the left-hand side, there's a Grand Steward apron with the royal blue. Just to his immediate right, the second from the left, is a Master Mason. The Worshipful Master is fourth from the left. You can see because of his apron, and he's wearing the Master's collar. So we were chatting about this, and I was saying it was easy to understand the entered apprentice apron because it is plain white, unadorned, and just has the triangular fall or flap. Within my jurisdiction, the Fellowcraft apron is similar. It has two rosettes on it, which can infer or imply the second degree, and I'm okay with that. The Master Mason's apron is more full, more complete. It has the tassels, and it has three rosettes. And so I can infer and understand a meaning behind that. But I asked my sponsor, my mentors, what is the shape on the apron of the Worshipful Master and on all those Grand Lodge officers? My sponsor said, well, it's obvious, it's a tau. My mentor said, no, no, no. It's not a tau because it's upside down. It's actually two squares. And another esteemed brethren listening in said, Marshall, you need to go and look it up, which I now understand was his way of saying, we don't know. So I went to the Sarnia District Masonic Library. If it looks like it's a basement office, well, that's because it is. There are over 2,000 volumes in the library, of which about 500 are cataloged. I know that because I am now the Sarnia District Librarian and Historian, and we do have the logo here for the Masonic Library and Museum Association, because I'm very pleased to say that we are a member of that association, just as the Chancellor Robert R. Livingston Masonic Library is. There are four standard encyclopedias for Masonic research and education. Three of them are here: Waite, Coyle, and Mackey. The fourth one is Bernard Jones, but it was out on loan when I took this photo. Not one of them, not one of these four standard classic works explains the Master's Emblem, but there's just enough information to make me look more closely at geometry. So then I had a moment of inspiration in 2015. Late one night, I was looking at a video of the history of mathematics, and the lecturer turned to the geometry of Euclid. As a Mason, my interest was piqued. Of course, he explained the 47th problem of the first book of Euclid, being the Pythagorean theorem. But then he said there are other, more beautiful and more elegant proofs. And he focused on several, including, the 12th problem of the first book of Euclid, which I recognized as being the Master's Emblem. So as I embarked on travels to other communities here in Toronto, I would look at their libraries to see what they had to help my researches. And could I really prove that the 12th problem of the first book of Euclid is the correct explanation of the Master's Emblem? I eventually found this book at McGill University Rare Book Room. It's published in 1570, and still the librarians entrusted me to hold on to this book for at least as long as this photo was taken. It's over 550 years old now. It is the first English translation of the books of geometry by Euclid. There's another copy of that book at the University of Toronto in the Robarts Library, the Fisher Rare Book Room. And yes, this particular step is intentional. And when I found more and more information to support my understanding of Euclid and the Master's Emblem, my dear wife would take photos of me with this big goofy grin as I came across even more information. She even came with me on vacation to Ireland, where I snuck away to go to the Rare Book Room of Trinity College. This particular textbook is on mathematics and geometry, and it's from the time, about the 1790s, that Right Worshipful Brother James Agar was a student at Trinity College. It's like every other mathematics textbook that you or I have ever handled. It has scribbles, it has doodles, and the answer key at the back of the book, well, it's missing. Now, I've been able to go to different libraries. I've also been able to use email and the internet to be able to access the Museum of Freemasonry, the Library of Freemasonry in London, England. And thankfully, there are excellent and helpful librarians everywhere. I sincerely thank Susan Snell and Louise Bichel for answering my many questions and providing me with scans of a number of documents. So after several years of research and well over looking at 200 primary sources of information, I focused my attention to producing this book. I can conclude and assert that the Master's Emblem on my apron and on the apron of other past masters is the diagrammatic proof of the 12th problem of the first book of Euclid. Now, I certainly recommend that you enjoy this wonderful book by Dr. Amy Newell. When she was the curator of the Scottish Rite Museum and Library, she prepared this book looking at the highly decorated aprons that were common through till about the mid-1800s. I encourage you for examples of other decorated aprons. Search for yourself and look at the aprons that you can find for George Washington, for Prince Hall, or for Robbie Burns. And if you'd like to hear Dr. Newell explain this book, she delivered a lecture, the Sankey Lecture, sponsored by my Grand Lodge, the Grand Lodge of Canada in the province of Ontario, in 2017. It's about an hour long, well worthwhile if you have an interest in the development of aprons. But let's build up to what the Master's Emblem is. Within the Grand Lodge AF and AM of Canada, the province of Ontario, the entered apprentice apron is described and defined in our Constitution as white lambskin, square, with a triangular flap or fall. The fellowcraft receives the same apron with the addition of 2 rosettes of blue moire ribbon that are finished with a metal button. And the Master Mason receives his own apron looking like this. It's larger. It has blue moire ribbon border and 2 chain tassels on blue moire ribbon, 3 blue moire ribbon rosettes. Now, there are some wonderful articles available to elaborate on and draw from the symbolism that's expressed by this apron. But our Book of Constitution simply says what it is made of. And our Book of Constitution includes the description of the apron for the master of the lodge and the past master. The rosettes on the Master Mason apron are replaced by 3 emblems. So the 3 rosettes are replaced by 3 shapes specifically called emblems. But what are the emblems? The usual explanations are not correct because the Book of Constitution gives a very peculiar phrase. So it's not a tau, not a level. The Book of Constitution says these are perpendicular lines upon horizontal lines, thereby forming 3 sets of 2 right angles. It is the diagrammatic proof of the 12th problem or proposition from the first book of the works of Euclid. So what is the 12th problem of the first book of Euclid? Well, this is how Euclid develops it. And remember, Euclid lived well before the internet, before PowerPoint, before the protractor was invented. He lived about 300 BC, before Common Era. And he used very simple tools to create a complete system of geometry. So he used a straight edge, or we might say a 24-inch gauge, to draw a horizontal line, and the 2 endpoints he called A and B. Then he used his pencil to mark a point C randomly, somewhere above this line AB. The 12th problem now is to draw a line from point C to the line segment AB, such that the line from C to the line segment AB is perpendicular or vertical to the line AB. Euclid certainly thinks differently than I do, because he said the next step is to pick any point somewhere under the horizontal line and call it point D. Then, again, using very simple tools, this time a set of compasses, place one leg of the compasses on point C, one leg of the compasses on point D, and scribe a circle. the circumference of a circle, actually. We now can see that the circumference of this circle intersects the horizontal line at points E and F. As Masons, we know that all points on the circumference of a circle are equally distant from the center. And we have created this circle with point C being the center and points D, E, and F being on the circumference. The texts that I have found in my research use an interesting word that has significance in our craft. No, pardon me. When we then take our pencil and our straight edge, we can draw lines from point C to point E and from point C to point F. And we know that their lengths are equal to each other. Then, as I said, the texts that I have found in my researches have an interesting word that has significance in our craft. Euclid says, now drop a straight line from point C so that it intersects line E and F in the middle at point G. And I'll pause for just a moment and let you look at this image one more time, because when I explain this to another past master, this is the point where he suddenly describes and declares, now I understand why we do this and that during the ceremony of installation of the Worshipful Master, which in my jurisdiction and in many jurisdictions is a private ceremony within the tiled recesses of the lodge and is open only to past masters and the master-elect. We now know that line E to C is exactly equal to line F to C because they are the radius of the circle. We also know that line CG is the same for the two triangles that are formed. And we know that line EG is equal to line FG because we said that point G cuts that line in half. So according to the geometry that Euclid has carefully built up to this point, we can assert that there are now two equal triangles, and they are both right-angled triangles. Thus, we truly have a vertical line out upon a horizontal line approved by forming two squares or two right angles. Let's clean this up a little bit to just get the diagrammatic proof. And now we have the shape, the symbol, the emblem, the master's emblem. The earliest description in the Constitution of the United Grand Lodge of England after Tuesday, February 15th, 1814, describes the shape to be of ribbon, 1/2 inch wide, 2.5 inches on the horizontal, and 1 inch high on the vertical. The wording is the same as is used in the Book of Constitution within my Grand Lodge, and I have found that same wording in several other Grand Lodge constitutions around the world. Now, this particular emblem is Australian. It comes from Australian supplier, regalia supplier, Blaskey's. The other three master's emblems on the apron are embossed with images of a level and a square. That particular shape, those dimensions are remarkably consistent over time because it's been over 200 years since the emblem was created. And they are remarkably consistent regardless of whether they are embroidered, such as this, or made of metal with a mosaic pavement, square and compasses and rays of light, such as this, or coming from different jurisdictions, such as this one, or this one. And even suppliers can have their own handiwork, but they don't change the external shape of the emblem. But back to the key question. What is the master's emblem? I can't accept that it is a tau because that is the letter T we take it from the Greek alphabet. I can't accept that it's a level because that's a working tool adopted from operative Masons. It's used as a working tool in many Masonic rituals and as a jewel of office in some jurisdictions. And the variability of how it is presented in different lodges at different times is amazing. I assert that it is because of the visual similarity with the 12th problem of the first book of Euclid, the literary congruence of the same words of Euclid coming into the Constitution, and the contextual relevance of Euclid and geometry and Freemasonry. I can assert that the Master's emblem is the diagrammatic proof of the 12th problem of the first book of Euclid. So I said it took me 2 years to be able to confirm that to myself, and I asked myself a number of questions, and I've answered these in the book. My chapters, I'll start with a particular question. I offer some explanations. I explain when did the emblem arise. I explain how the emblem came to be. I even go into details as to who would think of this. Who are the particular members of the committee that came up with this? And why didn't we see this before now? I delve into that as well. I also conducted research to say, why doesn't this make sense in the United States of America? And I've learned from my more recent research that my original research in my book for this last question is incomplete. Because very recently I saw this photo of the cover of the Empire State Mason. Now I know that the Grand Master of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of New York and the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge Free and Accepted Masons of New York wear aprons with the Master's emblem. When did this happen? I don't know. Why only the Grand Master? I don't know. Thus, I now know that my particular research is incomplete. And to just drive home the point even further, this is from the website of the Grand Lodge of New York. You can see, I trust, more clearly, the Grand Master, Most Worshipful Brother William M. Sardone, is wearing a Grand Master's apron with 3 Master's emblems on it. I'll direct you as I wrap up now to please consider going to my website because you can find out more information about my book. And you'll also be able to find a very thorough biography of Right Worshipful Brother James Agar, whom I assert brought this emblem to our presence and to our fraternity.